So we actually have recommendations for what the U.S. should do in this second cycle. It actually also mobilized the teachers to actually think of themselves not only as, oh, please do something and we'd like this, but actually an advocating tool to go to Washington, D.C., but also go to their state capitals and push and mobilize for this. So looking at a national plan of action to get in line with what most other countries, looking at ratification as well, creating a focal point. So we actually had one person responsible in the U.S. federal government, so that works out quite well. President Obama's sister is actually a pretty good friend, and she teaches as well. So it's like looking at, hey, what do we do? How do we coordinate? Let's mobilize this way and make it a priority in the country. So we look also at what's a simple thing the U.S. could do that wouldn't be that difficult. Looking at the National Human Rights Institution as well. Curriculum standards, getting the Department of Education to put funding for its training. So human rights educators who always say there's not enough funding could actually have some funding to then go and teach and organize even better for the third cycle. And equip state and local governments to review and improve their educational policies and practices to ensure human rights for every child. We even had human rights teacher training in the school environment. So the main thing that we organized was the UPR was going to happen, and you would hope that educators, and especially human rights educators, would see this as an opportunity. But until we went there and explained it to them how this would be successful, and then agreed to volunteer to do UPR consultations in California and New York and in Boston, they wouldn't have done it. So it actually took us even going to our own groups, convincing our own constituents how valuable this was. And I think we can see when we turn this in on September 15th, a lot of educators who all know each other were actually rejuvenated and reinvigorated, want to do even more. And I even have a Skype call on Sunday night with two of the educators that are like, what's our next steps? So we do know that this was just the first phase, the preparation. Now it's the interaction. So we'll network with Morocco, with the Philippines, with Costa Rica, and say, please ask questions about human rights education to the United States. These are the issues you cared about, you made the declaration, let's do that. And then at the consideration, all the teachers are going to show the UPR in their classroom as part of curriculum and organizing. And then of course, with the adoption in September, starting this semester. So in May will be our review, but then in September will be the adoption, and we'll see how many recommendations relate to human rights education, and then they'll start to figure out how to implement it and follow that up. And of course, if we're fortunate, we'll actually get some of these recommendations realized either at the adoption, where the U.S. will say, we've seen what the civil society has done, we agree we already are going to do this, or at the adoption, based on the questions and recommendations raised, they'll say we've appointed this person, or we put aside this much of a grant for human rights educators named after Cesar Chavez or something. So you can see how it can be an organizing tool to then push up human rights education onto the national agenda and make sure that we can really come up with the kind of education system we all know we need. And the other goal of it is actually then to use the U.S. as a model, but then do it for every country. Human rights education is probably one of the easiest things every country will say they'll do. They're not going to stop torturing, they're not going to shut down a bad jail, probably not going to divert 50% of their military budget to education. But you can push with the UPR, I think, so that we will finally, even as EIP's goal, be able to measure human rights education. Probably by the third cycle, you'll be able to see what has been done at the elementary, at the high school, what programs you have. And right now in the U.S., there's only one doctorate in human rights education, and that's at University of San Francisco, and they offer a master's. And then also Columbia University Teachers College also has an advanced master's degree in human rights. But there's not enough. But if we measure that and keep pushing for that, then we'll be able to see actually the advancement of human rights education through the UPR among all of our countries. So thank you very much for your attention. And I know everybody just had merguez and couscous, so thank you.
Merci Josh. Alors dans le petit quart d'heure qui nous reste, malheureusement c'est pas beaucoup pour l'éducation, mais on pourra toujours poursuivre nos échanges après sur nos expériences, je pense individuellement ou pour ma part, éventuellement, vous donner plus de détails sur l'école instrument de paix.